Alright, to take our photos, we want to make sure we have the turntable on, that we have our light on, and that we have our camera on. Now, if you don't care about retaining the specularity of your model, go ahead and just take all of your photos with polarization. Otherwise, we need to take one set of photos with polarization and the exact same set of photos without polarization. To get polarization, put our filter on our light and turn our lens on our camera 90 degrees. Do the opposite to take photos without polarization. Okay, with our turntable turned on, we can go to port 192.168.4.1, and that will give us access to controls. The most important setting is that quick shot is turned off. That will stop our turntable for each photo. And this button on the left will start taking all of our photos. Once we have all of our photos, what we need to do is we need to make sure that all of our non-polarized photos have the exact same name as their corresponding polarized photos. So we're going to go ahead and do that in Lightroom. Once that's open, we're going to take our first set of photos and drag those in. We can then select all of our photos and go to File, Export, and it will let us rename each of these files as we export them with a numbered suffix. So we're going to go ahead and click Export, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a new I'm going to create a new folder for our project, and in that folder I'm going to create two other folders, one for all of our polarized images and one for all of our non-polarized images. Once that is all exported, you can go ahead and right click on our photos and delete those photos from Lightroom. And then we're just going to go ahead and do the same thing with our next set of photos, which is all of our exact same photos as the ones before, except all of these ones are polarized versions of those photos. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing, select all of our photos, go to File, Export, and make sure that these photos will be named the exact same thing as all of our non-polarized images. I'm going to go ahead and save that in our polarized folder. Then once again, remove all of those photos from Lightroom and then continue on to our next set of photos. With these photos, these are second pass that I did for our model here. And so go ahead and just continue on, and we're going to do all of these same things for all of our sets of photos. Okay, so now we are done in Lightroom. We have all our photos saved, and what we want to do is go to Photoshop, and essentially we want to take all of our parts of our photos that are close to black, and we are just going to clamp them to be black. So that's what we're going to do. We have automation to do all of that for our photos at once. So we're going to go to File, Automate, Batch, and we're going to select our automation, and then we're going to select a folder for all of the files that we want to modify. which is going to be all of our polarized photos. Okay, and then we're just going to select a folder for all of the modified files to be saved. And so I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this polarized clamped. Right, and then the last thing to make sure we do is we just want to make sure that checkbox is checked for overriding our save as commands. Right, and that's going to go through all of our photos and clamp the black values. The next thing we want to do is essentially we have all of our non-polarized photos, and that contains all of our data including specularity. And we want to take our non-polarized photos, which removes the specularity. We want to subtract those photos from each other, and that's just going to leave us with our specularity information. Right, and for this we also have an automation. We had to do it in two parts, so go ahead and go to File, Scripts, Browse, and then on our desktop there is a script for us to run. And that script is going to have us select a folder with all of our non-polarized images in it. Then it's going to have us also select a folder that has all of our polarized images in it. And what this script does is it essentially just takes all of our non-polarized photos and takes the corresponding polarized photos and lays them on top of each other. So now we're going to have to do the second part of our automation, which is subtracting them. So we're going to go to File, Automate Batch, select our correct automation, and instead of selecting a folder for the modified images, we're going to select that we want to modify all of our open files. We're going to go ahead and select a folder for all of our modified images to be saved in. Right, and you can see that saves all of our specularity images. So the next thing we're going to do is build our model. So we're going to go ahead and open Metashape. In this tab here, Workflows is going to be our most important tab. We're essentially just going to do each of these steps in order. So we're first going to add photos, and these should be all of our polarized clamped photos. Our next step is to align those photos. Once that is done, we're going to move on to our next step, which is building a dense cloud. You can adjust some settings with this for depth filtering, and that's going to also help reduce some noise, but it's also going to greatly increase our computation time. Our next step is going to build the mesh. Alright, and that is our model. That's how it's looking right now. One optional step we can do is we can go to Tools and Decimate, and that's going to help us reduce our model from around 1 million vertices to around 5,000 vertices. When it asks you if you want to discard the original version, click No. We need that version to bake all of our high poly details onto our low poly model. So we're going to go ahead and go to export texture, and instead of diffuse map we want to export our normal map, and you can see that it's getting our data from our high poly version. Alright, we're going to go back to build texture. This time it is the diffuse map that we want to build. Alright, so our model is pretty much all set, so we can go ahead and go to File, Export Model. I like to save as an OBJ because that will allow us to save the textures with it. And so go ahead and make sure that we have export textures turned on. Alright, and then in our 3D software we can import that file. And you can see that's our model there. If we go to Material Preview, we can see what it looks like with the textures. In our Material tab, you can see it automatically set up 2 textures, one for our base color and then one for our normal map. One thing you might want to do is you might want to add the specularity back onto the model. So what we're going to go ahead and do is go back to Metashape. These are all of our photos here. If we right click on one and change path, and then change path for all of our photos, we can change our path to our specularity images. And then we can rebuild our texture to get a specularity map. Then in our 3D software, we just have to drop in our specularity map. And we're going to go ahead and change that to non-color. One thing to know is when importing a OBJ, it often resets the specularity value to 0 when it should be set to 0.5. We can then plug in our roughness map, and there is our final model.